For thousands of years, humans have been turning wild birds into something useful. We took jungle fowl and created chickens. We took wild ducks and turned them into farm animals. We bred geese, turkeys, pigeons, quail, and even enormous ostriches. Some gave us meat. Others gave us eggs, feathers, leather, messages, or even protection. And then there are crows. They live almost everywhere we do. They eat our food. They build nests on our buildings. They learn our routines. They recognize individual people. Some can solve puzzles, use tools, and remember dangerous humans for years. So here's the strange question. If humans managed to domesticate so many birds, why did we never domesticate crows? It wasn't because crows were too rare. It wasn't because they lived too far away. And it wasn't because humans never noticed them. In fact, we've been living beside these birds for thousands of years. The real reason is much stranger. Because the very thing that makes a crow extraordinary may also be the thing that makes domestication almost impossible. And to understand why, we first need to understand what domestication actually means. Imagine finding a wild crow and feeding it every morning. After enough time, that bird might stop flying away when you approach. It might even recognize your face. It could become comfortable around you. But that does not mean you've domesticated it. You've only tamed one animal. Domestication is something much bigger. It happens across generations, when humans repeatedly choose which animals reproduce. The calmer animals are bred. The nervous ones are excluded. Then the process happens again, and again, and again. Over many generations, the population itself begins to change. This is why a chicken isn't simply a jungle bird that happens to like humans. Its entire relationship with the world has been reshaped. The same principle created dogs from ancient wolves and countless livestock breeds from their wild ancestors. But there's a catch. For domestication to work, the animal has to tolerate captivity, reproduce reliably, accept human control, and survive with a different set of pressures. And surprisingly, many birds fit those requirements extremely well. Take the chicken. Its wild ancestor, the red jungle fowl, already lived in social groups and ate seeds, insects, and other easily available foods. When humans began cultivating crops, in Southeast Asia, they accidentally created an enormous new food source. Grain appeared around settlements. Insects gathered near fields. Food scraps accumulated near people. The birds that were less frightened by humans had an advantage. They could feed closer to villages. They survived. They reproduced. And eventually, humans began selecting them deliberately. Similar opportunities existed with ducks and geese. Pigeons found artificial cliffs in human buildings. They could eat grain near settlements and reproduce in captivity. Humans quickly discovered that pigeons were useful for food, breeding, and eventually communication. The important point is that these birds didn't need extraordinary intelligence to survive beside us. They needed to be adaptable. They needed to reproduce. And most importantly, they needed to tolerate human control. Crows seem to have those qualities too. They're omnivores. They're highly adaptable. They mature relatively quickly. They live socially. And they've become extremely successful in human environments. So on paper, crows should have been excellent candidates. But then we run into the problem: their intelligence. A crow doesn't simply react to the world, it studies it. New Caledonian crows, for example, are famous for using and manufacturing tools. They can shape plant material into tools for extracting food from places their beaks can't reach. And young birds can learn these techniques by observing older members of their group. That means Information can move from one generation to the next. But their intelligence goes far beyond tools. Crows can solve unfamiliar problems. They can remember individual humans, and they can change their behavior based on what they've learned. One of the most remarkable examples comes from research on American crows. Scientists discovered that crows could remember specific human faces associated with danger. If a person had captured a crow while wearing a particular mask, the birds could later recognize that face and react aggressively. Even more surprising, other crows could learn about the dangerous person without personally experiencing the original encounter. Think about what that means. A crow doesn't need to be captured by you to decide that you're dangerous. It can learn from another crow, and that information can continue spreading through the group. For an intelligent social animal, knowledge itself becomes a survival tool, and that creates a serious problem for domestication. Imagine you're an ancient farmer. You decide that crows could be useful. Maybe you want them to clean up scraps. Maybe you want to breed them for some other purpose. So you begin capturing the calmer birds. You keep them close to your settlement. You breed the ones that tolerate people. Sounds simple, but the crows are watching. They notice which humans capture birds. They remember faces. They observe patterns, and they can communicate danger to other members of their social group. Your breeding experiment isn't happening in isolation. You're dealing with a network of intelligent animals that can learn from one another. A chicken doesn't need to understand why a human is approaching it. A crow might, and that's a huge difference. The problem becomes even more interesting when we look at what domestication does to animals over long periods. Domesticated animals often become less reactive to threats. They can develop calmer temperaments and physical differences from their wild relatives. That makes sense. Humans repeatedly select animals that are easier to control. But for a crow, extreme alertness isn't a useless personality trait. It's part of its survival system. A crow needs to notice changes, remember threats, solve new problems, find food in unpredictable environments, understand other animals, and learn from members of its group. In other words, the traits that make a crow difficult to control are also the traits that make it successful. And this is where the story gets really strange. Humans didn't completely lose the crow. We simply never owned it. Instead, something else happened. Crows moved into our world while remaining wild. Look around almost any modern city, and you'll find them. They use rooftops as lookout points. They search through garbage. They exploit food left behind by humans. They build nests near buildings, and they learn how our environments work. In some places, crows have even learned to use traffic. They can place hard food items where passing vehicles will crush them, then retrieve the pieces afterward. They aren't becoming domesticated, they're becoming better at using us. That distinction matters. A domesticated animal depends on the human-created environment. A crow exploits it. That's a completely different relationship. Humans provide enormous opportunities without realizing they're doing it. Cities contain food. Buildings provide nesting sites. Roads create new ways to access resources. And garbage creates an endless supply of things that would never exist in a natural ecosystem. The crow doesn't need to become part of our household to benefit from civilization. It simply needs to understand civilization. And crows are remarkably good at learning. There's another reason crows have been so successful. They don't rely on a single survival trick. They can change. If one food source disappears, they search for another. If humans create a new obstacle, they can experiment. If a dangerous person appears, they can remember that person. If another crow discovers a useful technique, others can learn from it. That flexibility is incredibly valuable in a world that changes constantly. And humans have created the most rapidly changing environment on Earth. A forest may remain relatively stable for generations. A city can change within a few years. New buildings appear. Roads move. Food sources disappear. New machines arrive. Garbage systems change. And somehow, crows keep figuring it out. That's why the crow's story may not actually be a story about human failure. Maybe we were asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, why couldn't humans domesticate crows? We should ask, why would a crow need domestication in the first place? Humans domesticated animals because domestication gave us control. We wanted predictable food, reliable eggs, feathers, labor, companionship, protection. Domestication worked because both sides entered a new relationship. Humans received useful traits. The animals received food, shelter, and protection. But crows found another option. They could live beside humans without surrendering control. They didn't need us to feed them every day. They didn't need us to protect them from predators. They didn't need to obey commands. They simply learned how to take advantage of the world we built. And, perhaps, that's the most remarkable part of the entire story. A chicken became successful because humans changed it. A crow became successful while remaining itself. It learned our streets. It learned our habits. It learned which people were dangerous. It learned where food appeared. It learned how to exploit machines, buildings, traffic, and waste. But it never needed to become our pet. It never needed to become dependent. It simply stayed wild. And that may be the real reason we never domesticated crows. Not because they were too useless, not because they were too aggressive, not because humans didn't notice them, but because the crow's greatest advantage is its ability to remain independent while adapting to us. For thousands of years, humans have reshaped the animals around them. We turned wolves into dogs. Wild. Jungle fowl into chickens. Wild. Pigeons into dozens of specialized breeds. We transformed birds that once lived entirely on their own into animals that now depend heavily on human environments. But crows took another path. They followed us into villages, then towns, then cities. They watched civilization grow around them, and instead of becoming domesticated, they learned how to live alongside it. So the next time you see a crow sitting on a rooftop, staring down at the street, remember what you're looking at. It's not simply another black bird waiting for scraps. It's an animal capable of remembering faces, solving problems, learning from others, and adapting to a world humans completely transformed. And perhaps the strangest part is this. We spent thousands of years teaching animals how to live with us. Crows figured out how to live beside us. So ask yourself one final question. Did humans fail to domesticate crows? Or did crows simply never need us to? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more strange history, forgotten mysteries, and the hidden reasons behind the world around us.